Hello, my name is Tylluan. I'm a solitary pagan witch, I'm an author and the founder of the Wolf and Howl Press. And today's little chat is about sacred gardening. Oh, that sounds impressive, doesn't it? What I mean is, what do we expect of a garden? Now, I do appreciate not everybody has a garden. Most of us have some space, a windowsill, indoors, outdoors, what have you. And we can make a garden out of that. And we can make it sacred too. In the Middle Ages, they used to have something called a cloister garth, which was like a little area in the monastery set aside for contemplation. In fact, the word garth means garden in Welsh. And the trick with gardens is to realise that they exist on several planes. You know, you can have the real garden. It may be partly real, partly imagined. And it may exist in another world, on another plane. Sometimes they overlap a bit, you know, but they're very close together. And this is important, you know, they are close together. And what we have to do is try and make the most of whatever we've got. And I'm reading this today because we're doing several talks back to back and it's easier for me to do it this way. I mean, when I was young, I was brought up in a city, and I was brought up in a place that had your average backyard, you know, and it was fairly quickly paved over to keep the mud out of the house because that was what people often did. But there was a lot of parkland around, and we'd grab a bottle of pop and we'd go up and play up there for hours in the fields and the woods and everything. And one day I remember going with my mother, and I came from a family of witches, and she had brought scissors with her, of all things. And she said, come on, let me show you something. Now this in itself was pretty significant because she wasn't that sort of mother. So we sat down. She said, I'm going to show you how to make a garden. Bear in mind, we're just sitting in the park on the grass. And she took out the scissors, little nail scissors, and she started snipping away. And what she did, she created a lawn with the shortest grass, and then the longer grass she trimmed and she made hedges. And she picked daisies and put them in, and they were like flower beds, you see. And it was absolutely pure magic. I could see it. I could see this miniature garden. It was nothing like what was there. It was what I could see. It was something quite magical. It was a very important lesson for me that gardens actually exist in the mind, not just in the view or the eyesight. A sacred aspect of a garden is always constant. You know, the gardens have changed down the years. I mean, an Egyptian garden was different from a Roman garden, was different from an Anglo-Saxon garden, was different from a Victorian cottage garden, things like that. They're all different, but the sacred aspect stays the same. What is the sacred aspect of a garden? Well, it's there's a buzz to it. There's this feeling that somehow there's something there. You can almost hear it. It's a kind of I was going to say it's a rattle, but that's not the right word. I think the buzz is the nearest, but it's very quiet. You can feel it. You can almost see it. And in the 18th century, the period called the Enlightenment, we had famous landscape gardeners like Capability Brown, and they were encouraged to look for what they call the genus loci, the spirit of a place. That's my fridge going on, sorry about that, when they were making gardens. And I think they were onto something. I think they were really trying to create something a little more spiritual, a little more sacred. And then it all got lost again. We had the Industrial Revolution, houses went up streets, tiny little backyards, people had to hang their washing across the lanes, anything. It was all lost again. And I think, you know, there's this idea of having something special. I remember somebody years ago took this camera out into the garden and filmed something. I think it was our dogs. But when we played it back, the noise of the bird song was almost deafening. And that's often a clue. If you can have bird song in your garden, it's a very special place. But I had never really noticed it. I'd taken it for granted until we captured it in the filming. And then I thought, wow, what a special garden, that's incredible. And now, of course, I hear the bird song much more easily. And the best place to start looking for sacredness in your garden is anywhere where there's been very little human influence. All those areas where you've got weeds is a good place to start. Lots of weeds and things like that. Sometimes it's a big area, sometimes it's very, very small. Cemeteries are a good place sometimes because they've never been ploughed. You get all sorts of weird stuff in cemeteries. Not because bodies are buried there, but because they haven't been messed about with very much. Woods, mountaintop, anything like that, you will notice it. And once you notice it, you can start trying to look for it and cultivate it in your own garden. And it's very important, you know, people think you have to have harmony. That harmony is better than chaos, but actually you can't have harmony without chaos. How do you know it's harmony unless you've got a bit of chaos lurking nearby? You don't. And if you concentrate on harmony in the garden to the exclusion of all else, you end up with a kind of horticultural baby food, you know? It's awful. You have to try to make something special. You don't want to end up with I have somebody near me who weeds out every single weed, hacks this, hacks that, until it's all rigid, regimented. And it's crippled. You know, you don't want a garden that's crippled. It's not going to be something you're going to enjoy sitting in. You're not going to give you any pleasure. It's just going to be there. And when we're acting as witches, we have to be aware of these things. We have to try to make something really... It's contacting, it's a bridge, if you like, to other spaces. People sometimes feel you have to create a sort of mini Stonehenge in order to have a sacred garden. You don't. You need certain unkempt bits, you know. There was a tradition years ago in Wales that people would leave a patch of nettles. They called them the devil's nettles. It was a little patch they left unkempt. It was felt to be wrong to have your garden completely perfect. They understood on some level from some tradition somewhere. They still understood this idea that you have to have a little bit of chaos to balance the harmony. It's a strange thing, you know. What you're trying to create is peace and seclusion. Not everything in my garden is lovely sort of peace. I mean, I went out into my garden the other day and discovered a load of feathers. Somebody killed a blackbird. Awful. But that's just the way it is. What we're trying to do is get a peace between the two different planes, the present physical plane and spiritual planes that surround us. We're trying to have a kind of peace between those two so that the two can merge. If you go and try it, you'll see what I mean. It sounds terribly complicated, but it's a matter of being sensitive to the place, of spending perhaps a whole year just sitting in whatever space you've got, in a park, in a garden, waiting for the train, anything, and just cultivating this sense of where is the most peaceful part, where is the most special bit, which are the best plants. And I don't mean seeds we've planted, but wild plants even. What grows here? What have I got? What is this place really like? And that's when you start to experience the real peace that comes between the two planes. It sounds terribly complex, and when you try it, it's terribly simple. But I'll leave you with that. Get outside and go and give it a try. And thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.